Chapter 6 Secular Jewish Choruses, the sixth in a series of podcasts on the history and nature of Jewish choral music. In this chapter, we will look at the rise of secular Jewish choruses in Lodz, Poland. The late 19th century witnessed a new phenomenon, the establishment of secular Jewish choruses, independent ensembles, unaffiliated with a synagogue. The primary mission of these organizations was to perform concerts and to express Jewish cultural identity. At the end of the 19th century, the European Jewish community was divided into several factions. For some Jews, life would continue exactly as it had for countless centuries. They had no use for the secular world. The spiritual realm guided their every move. But for others, a more liberal attitude on the part of civil authorities signaled an opportunity for them to end their age-old isolation. While the assimilationists attempted to abandon as much of the Jewish way of life as was possible, others attempted to adapt Jewish practices to modern times. Jews began to assert their identity in cultural as well as religious terms. Jews began to experiment with new forms of cultural expression, including choral singing. In 19th century Europe, there was a spectacular growth of general secular choral singing. There were several factors that contributed to this phenomenon, including the decline of the church, the emergence of a powerful middle class, the spread of universal education, and the resultant prevalence of musical literacy, the growth of leisure time, the spread of democracy and socialism, the falling costs of printing, including printing sheet music, and the increasing demand for performances of the great oratorios of Handel and then Haydn and Mendelssohn. There were also choruses that were affiliated with political parties and subcultures. Factory employers encouraged choral singing as a means of making their workers more productive and loyal to the company. In 1835, George Hogarth, music critic of the London Daily News, who was also the father-in-law of Charles Dickens, wrote the following: "Every town has its choral society, supported by the amateurs of the place and its neighborhood, where the works of Handel and the more modern masters are performed with precision and effect by a vocal and instrumental orchestra consisting of mechanics and workpeople. Their employers promote and encourage so salutary a recreation by countenancing and contributing to defray the expenses of their musical associations. And some provide regular musical instruction for such of their workpeople as show a disposition for it." Jewish communities had their choral societies as well. Some music directors selected a repertoire that was not that different from that of the non-Jewish choirs, performing oratorios, choral symphonies, operas, and even selections from masses and requiems, either in the original language or translated into Yiddish. Others chose arrangements of Jewish folk songs and popular Zionist songs, synagogue compositions, and new works often composed by the ensemble's conductor. Many emancipated Jews who had developed a taste or experience in performing or composing Western music were eager to be a part of the new choral movement. Jews modeled these secular choruses on similar organizations that had recently become popular in Christian Europe. It all started in Lodz, Poland. Joseph Rumshinsky claimed that the Hazomir Chorale, founded in 1899 in Lodz, Poland, was the first of its kind. He noted in his autobiography, quote, "When we stood up and started to sing, a holy musical fire was kindled by the first Jewish choral ensemble in the world." Unquote. The famous author Yehuda Lamed Peretz was one of the founders of the Hazomir Choral Society, which began its activities in Lodz, Poland in 1899. Lodz Hazomir flourished under a succession of conductors, including Joseph Rumshinsky, Zabel Zilberts, Ephraim Shkliar, Israel Feibisches, Isaac Sachs, and Theodor Reider. Here is how Joseph Rumshinsky described the origins of the choir in his autobiography. In 1899, a Polish attorney by the name of N. Shapiro petitioned the governor of Lodz for permission to establish a Jewish choral organization. Anticipating the hostile reaction with which government officials greeted any gathering that smacked of political sedition, Shapiro asserted that his organization would serve patriotic aims by keeping the young people of Lodz away from the revolutionary and anti-government assemblies that were poisoning their minds. Shapiro ended his petition with the words, "Let these young kids amuse themselves with choral singing, and then there will be none of that revolutionary foolishness on their minds." Well, not only did the governor grant the petition, he instructed the police not to interfere with the choir's rehearsals or to interrupt them in any way from their patriotic work. A certain Mr. Hartenstein was appointed the choir's conductor, but after a few rehearsals it became apparent that someone with more professional expertise would be needed. It was at this point that the 18-year-old Joseph Rumshinsky was engaged to become the first permanent conductor of the chorus. And now back to his autobiography. But all was not smooth sailing for the fledgling chorus. Hostility was encountered on many fronts. The Zionist activists couldn't understand the purpose of choral singing as a form of nationalistic expression. The assimilated Jews derided the Jiden who wanted to waste time singing their Mayufis. And the Hasidim were outraged that young men and women would be meeting together in the same room. About a year had passed by. Although the rehearsals were going well, people were still making fun of the chorus. At that time, we decided two things. First of all, to name our chorus Hazomir, and secondly, to give a concert in a major concert hall. After the concert was announced, within 3 days the tickets were sold out, eagerly snatched up by those Zionists and assimilationists who were ready to come and laugh at us. I will never forget the feelings we had coming into the concert. We knew that this was the day of judgment for the Lodz Hazomir, and that our judges would be unforgiving beyond pity. I felt like a general just before leading his soldiers into battle. After we sang our first number, Al Mishmar HaYarden, the hall was silent. We were surprised and frightened. What was going on? Could it have been such a flop that no one would applaud? Well, when I turned around to face the audience, I saw an unbelievable sight. Hundreds of people sitting as if mystified, jaws hanging down and glassy-eyed as if, God forbid, they were paralyzed. After what seemed like an eternity, the audience awoke from its lethargy and thunderous applause broke out. There were cries of "Bravo!" and "Encore!" We had to repeat the opening song 3 times. Then, with each succeeding number, the enthusiasm grew and grew. At the conclusion of the concert, hundreds of young people, including the assimilationists, the Hasidim, and the Zionists, became one great crowd, and they danced in front of the theater. The victory had come. Jewish society now began to respect Hazomir and regard it as a serious factor in Jewish cultural life. Branches of Hazomir and other choruses with similar agendas were established throughout Eastern Europe, in Warsaw, Vilna, Lemberg, Krakow, Bialystok, and Radom, but also as far west as Copenhagen and north as Helsinki. The flame even spread to the west, as Zari Gottfried points out in his article, Yiddish Folk Choruses in America. The Jewish people were not alone among the many ethnic groups making their home in these United States to transplant their native culture to the new soil. As part of their living cultural heritage, the Scandinavian and Central European immigrants established choral societies in all major metropolitan centers. But while these immigrants were able to draw on well-established sources and traditions, the Jewish immigrants could claim no such sources or patterns. They were thirsting for all sorts of cultural expression, often denied them in the countries of their origin. Despite the pangs of adjustment to the new land, the new immigrants, in search of fulfilling their cultural drives, began to organize amateur theatrical and musical groups and other media of cultural expression. In 1999, Carol Tellerman reminisced about her experiences as a teenager singing in Hazomir, the secular Jewish choral ensemble in Lodz, Poland.
To me, Hazomir was like my world, my love, my beauty, my everything. When we came into the building, it was like a temple of holiness, of music. Each room where we rehearsed was almost like a concert hall, but the acoustics was so beautiful.
As we toured Lodz, we learned the history of how the Zamir Chorale grew so popular here. At the turn of a century, Lodz was a booming textile city, and it soon became a magnet for Jews from all over Eastern Europe. It was 1899 when the Zamir Chorale first performed here. The young conductor Joseph Rumshinsky feared that even in this modern industrial city, Jews weren't ready for the untraditional, shocking idea of men and women singing choral music together. He recalled the first number of the first concert. When we finished, the hall was silent. What was going on? After what seemed like an eternity, they awakened and thunderous applause broke out. The victory had come. By the 1930s, Zamir had caught on like wildfire. all across Poland, but especially in Lodz, where 40% of the population was Jewish. And Jews played a huge role in the cultural and artistic life of the city.
Lodz was a very young Jewish community, a community with great ambitions, a lot of imagination that combined both their economic endeavors as well as their spiritual endeavors and artistic endeavors. So it was really a very appealing city.
All kinds of Jews were drawn to Zamir. Hasidic Jews, strictly Orthodox Jews, modern Reform Jews, capitalist Jews, socialist Bundist Jews. Everyone liked the mix of Yiddish and Hebrew, old and new, that the original Zamir performed.
HaZamir's anthem was composed sometime around 1903 by the Warsaw HaZamir conductor Leo Lof. The music is in a rousing patriotic style, in the bright key of A major, in a joyous tempo, with sharply chiseled rhythms and ascending melodic lines. The lyrics by David Frischmann reflected, as well as inspired, an identity shift among the Jews of Eastern Europe. Jewishness could be expressed more comfortably as a nationality than as a religion. The anthem begins with these words: Zamru achim zamru uvazimra neorer am. Sing, brethren, sing, and then with song we will rouse the nation. These opening lines of the anthem reveal a secularization of this verse from Psalm 47, verse 7. Zamru lelohim zameru, zamru lemalkenu zameru. Sing to God, sing. Sing to our heavenly King, sing. This song is no longer directed to God, the heavenly King. Now it is a call to social action. It is song that will awaken the Jewish people from its dark ages and into the Enlightenment. The appeal to brothers evokes the ideals of the European Enlightenment, echoing the well-known egalitarian and communal sentiments of the French Revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternité, and of Schiller's Ode to Joy, made famous by Beethoven, Alle Menschen werden Brüder. These musical maskilim, intellectuals, enlightened Jews, were dedicated to the idea that music had the power to inspire people, to create a sense of community, and to change their lives for the better. The anthem continues, Uva'am ne'orer libot, uva libot regesh ram. Then we will awaken the hearts of the nation, and in their hearts an exalted sentiment. V'kam ha'am v'ne'or v'chayim v'chayim yamir. And the people will awaken and be enlightened, and they will exchange old life for new. Here again, the poet Frischmann is riffing off a biblical base. The idea of wakening the Jewish nation from its slumber and seeing the light is found several times in the book of the prophet Isaiah. Ha'am ha'holchim b'choshech ra'u or gadol. The people that walked in the darkness have seen a great light. A line familiar to many of us from Handel's treatment in his oratorio, Messiah. In the early 1940s, Hazomir continued to perform concerts in the Lodz ghetto under Nazi occupation. And then they disappear. But other Hazomir choruses throughout the world continued to flourish. And then in the 1960s, a renaissance of Hazomir, now known as simply Zamir and later Hazamir, arose in the United States. And this is a topic that we will continue in a later chapter. In the second half of this chapter, we will look at choral music that arose out of the Society for Jewish Folk Music in St. Petersburg, Russia.